Hello fellow crafters, I'm Karen, and in this video I'll be showing you how to make this wreath. The original concept I had for this wreath was a picture I really just had in my mind of the perfect summer meadow, where you've got that overgrown, sort of long grass look with little flowers mixed in here and there, and just the feeling that the whole thing is sort of untouched. And naturally, as I was thinking about this, the picture expanded to include a nice little fence around the outside and a little bicycle that we took on our trip to go see this meadow in the first place. So as I was imagining this, I wanted to take that idea or that picture and turn it into a wreath. And the bicycle and the fence would be the sort of focal point of it, with just these wild-looking flowers and greens around the outside. So that's what we're aiming for today, and the tools and materials that you'll need are up on the screen for this. So we're going to be needing our wire wreath, and mine is 18 inches in diameter, as well as our bicycle, and mine is 8 inches in length and was a little bit tricky to find, though I did locate it through Hobby Lobby online, and I couldn't find anything else that was roughly the right size, so I recommend that one. For our fence, we're going to need some popsicle sticks, and I'm going to show you how to use vinegar and steel wool to make them look like they've been aging outside. And then of course we'll need our grasses and flowers. I would aim for only flowers that are really small looking. The ones I have are probably not authentically all field growing flowers. I think some might be tree flowers, but that's alright, I don't mind. And then we'll just need some hot glue and wire to connect our pieces to the frame. When I first decided that I wanted to have a fence, I knew that I was going to use popsicle sticks to make it, because that's kind of the simplest way to approach it. But I wanted the popsicle sticks to look like they had been outside, and I wasn't sure how to make it look sort of weathered or aged. And I was originally planning on just using paint and layering it and feathering it to try and make it look like it was weathered. But then I decided to do a little bit more digging and figure out how to make wood look aged. And I came across this really neat method. And all you do is mix vinegar with steel wool. So I took 1 cup of vinegar, about a half of a coarse steel wool pad, and I let the steel wool soak in the vinegar for about 2 days. From what I was reading, you can let it soak for less time and you'll get sort of a lighter tint, or more time and you'll get a darker tint. So I went with the 2 days. I didn't cut up the steel wool at all. I just dropped that half of it right in the vinegar and just let it sit open on the top. And I tested it a little bit today, and I found that one dip or one brushing on of the solution onto the popsicle sticks was enough to give it sort of a silvery look, and then 2 coats gives it more of a darker gray look. So what I'm going to be aiming for with my fence pieces is that darker gray look. Got a pair of tweezers here, and basically all I'm going to do is dunk my popsicle sticks into the solution, which I'll have to kind of tip a little bit in the jar or pour into another container. And we're going to just coat those and let them dry, and then we'll give them a second coat and then let that coat dry. That should give us some nice weathered looking popsicle sticks that we can glue together and make into a fence. You can see by comparison to this normal popsicle stick how much the vinegar and steel wool solution has added in color to these dyed popsicle sticks. So there's quite a bit of variety between the sticks themselves, and it does bring out the grain a little bit of the wood. And I think that's all good for making it look sort of weathered in our fence for our field. So they've been drying for about a total of a half hour between the 2 coats of solution that I put on. So they need a little bit more time to dry out a little bit more completely before I try and glue them together into the fence formation. But once they are completely dry, I'll go ahead and glue them into the final position that I want to have for my fence, which I had pre-planned. And then we can move on to doing the grass around the outside of the wreath. My original thought was that the bicycle would need to be the first thing attached to the wire frame that will be the base of our wreath, But then I started realizing that that would sort of be in the wrong order because we want some of the grass and flowers and things to be behind the bicycle. So I think it'll be okay as far as difficulty to put some of the flowers in behind it later. But for the grass, I wanted to go ahead and do this first so that we have sort of a grass base. And on top of that, we can add the fence, the bicycle, and then the flowers. So these grass stalks are kind of inconveniently assembled, but they were the best thing that I could find as far as the look that I wanted to have. And the reason it's inconvenient is because they're very nicely made, meaning that there's this bit of tape that goes around, and then these individual blades of grass are sort of tucked in there. And the tricky bit is that that leaves me with these two long pieces that are all one big unit rather than a bunch of smaller units that I can attach. So I'm essentially going to have to deconstruct these, and you can tell that there's kind of a set of darker blades and then a set of brighter blades and then even a third set of even lighter than that. So I'm going to, I think, disassemble as much as possible, then sort of make them into bunches that I can attach with some combination probably of wire and or hot glue. I'm somewhat surprised to find that those are actually connected pieces or blades of grass. So I think they're small enough that I can just sort of break them apart. But this does help me to move them in units. So I think I'm going to take like maybe 5 or 6 of each of these as a group of each color. So we got our light, medium, and dark, and make a bundle out of them, and then attach those bundles as sort of medium units. So that's 3 of each, and I can attach them right together at the bottom, and we've got a bunch of grass blades. I now have 14 bundles of grass that are 1 of each shade, light, medium, and dark green, and I need to attach them to the wire frame. So what I'm basically aiming for here is approximately 4-inch spacing, because I did some math with the circumference of the circle and the number of grass groupings that I have. So it works out for me that I need about 4 inches apart, and then I'm trying to go to set the bottom of the grouping towards the outside of the circle, and then aim it sort of towards the middle of the wreath frame. And I'm hoping that that will kind of flare out the grass a little bit, and we can probably tweak things later. And remember that it doesn't need to look full now because we're going to be adding a lot of other flowers and things on top. You won't see any of this when we're done. So we need to attach these. I'm hoping to just use some hot glue, but I may use some wire just because it'll help firm up the bottom structure here, and as we add more layers on, it'll be more secure. So we've got a couple of options, but we need to attach all of these around the circle. Now that the popsicle sticks are dry from the vinegar solution, we can start forming them into the fence. So there are a couple of things we want to be keeping in mind as we do this. Remember that we're going to be having a bicycle sit in the front of all of this. So you want to make sure that your fence is going to be behind that and sort of built into the depth of the wreath. And what I mean by that is that I'm aiming for the fence to sort of look like it goes behind the wreath on the inside, but in front of the wreath on the outside, or sort of into the wreath on the outside. So to achieve a little perspective, you can put the slats of the fence, which are the horizontals, more parallel where the fence should look closer, and then where the fence should look further away, you can angle the slats such that they get closer together. That'll make it look like there's more distance there. So I'm going to try and achieve that while also sort of tucking the fence behind. I think it's going to end up being pretty much a straight piece as far as the front to back distance goes. So it's not going to be like stair-stepping front to back. It's going to be flat and then just angled. But we just want to keep in mind that perspective so that it looks right in the end. I've got my fence built. Now I need to figure out how to attach it to my wreath. So two things to consider here. How I'm actually going to attach it, which is probably going to involve a lot of hot glue and possibly some wire, depending on how I can get it affixed. And then the other thing to consider is just that we want to choose now the orientation of the wreath. And since I've already done the grass, I can have an idea now of sort of, I know that there are areas that have denser grass and less dense grass. So I'm going to put this where the grass is less dense to sort of hide the fact that my grass is not even. At this point, the fence is secured in the middle and it's very sturdy. I have no concerns about it falling off, so we can add the bicycle. So here's the bicycle that I found, and you can see that the chain side of it is on this side, which means that when we attach it to the wreath, we want this to be the front, so it looks a little bit nicer than if this were the front. So that's going to determine for me that the bicycle will point to my right when I'm looking at the front of the wreath. And I want it to look like the bicycle is sort of leaning on the fence, but we will need to make sure that we use enough wire and hot glue to secure the bicycle to the wreath frame so that it's not dependent on being attached to the fence. And the other thing I considered in this process was the bicycle is actually fairly weighty, and for the sake of hanging the wreath in the future when it's complete, I want this to be roughly at the bottom center of the wreath. Originally, I think I was thinking a little bit more off to the side, but I'm concerned that it will just, because of the weight, end up becoming the bottom and then make the whole thing look crooked. So I want to start off with the bicycle in the bottom, and just like we attached the fence, we'll go ahead and attach the bicycle. And now we have a bicycle attached to our fence. And again, it feels very secure. I attached it in 4 different places. So both wheels, sort of the frame by the wheel, but also the wheel on the front. At the handlebars basket, which I attached to the fence. And then at the pedal that's in the back, which just conveniently lined up with one of these cross pieces in the wreath frame. So all of those wire points are covered with hot glue just to make sure nothing slides around and to cover the pointy ends of the wire. I've now reached the time where I need to add the flowers to the wreath, and I've got 4 different sets to choose from here. So I've got these really tiny white flowers that I picked actually mostly for the greens to fill it in. So this is actually 1 bush, and I'm going to probably put these in last wherever I happen to need any sort of filler. Then I have these also small yellow flowers, 2 bushes of this. These navy blue flowers that I selected more for their texture than anything else, although I did want something that was navy colored in there. So 3 stems of that. And then these pink flowers, which might be cherry blossom or something like that. I'm not even sure if they would grow in a field or if they grow on a tree, but they're pretty and I picked them. So I will probably start adding these because they are the stockiest, which I would prefer to have towards the back so that it hides. Also because these are on longer stems, you get a lot of flowers on a long stem. It can kind of be in the background and peeking through wherever there happen to be any gaps. So I think I will probably start with the pink, then probably go in reverse order of what I just described. I'll go to the blue, the yellow, and then the white at last. And you can always add things in later. The blue ones happen to have these nice leaves. I'll probably use some of those as filler. Although I want to keep the big leaves to a minimum in general, because remember we're going for small flowers, grass, small leaves, this sort of field look as opposed to the tree look. So I will be attaching these predominantly by hot glue. Some of the bigger stalks, like the pink flowers, might need to be also wired in place depending on how sturdy it looks and feels. When you're working with these wire frames, you have to use a little bit more wire to support things because you're not working with something like styrofoam where you can just shove the ends of the stems right into the styrofoam and glue them in place. So depending on the medium you're working with, you have to adjust a little bit. Thanks for supporting Tickled Fancy Crafting by watching this video. This content is available on YouTube and Rumble, so click the like or Rumble button to let me know that you enjoyed the content, and subscribe to see new Tickled Fancy Crafting videos in your feed. If you'd like to be informed directly about the content, ring the notification bell on YouTube or adjust your notification settings on Rumble. Comment with crafts that you would like to see in the future, and remember, you can make this.